Imagine the moment when your own team stops defending you, when the people who are supposed to have your back start publicly tearing into your work, when someone who's been accused of being biased in your favor suddenly becomes your harshest critic. That's exactly what just happened to Rachel Reeves, and it's the kind of political moment that makes you realize someone's career isn't just struggling, it's actively disintegrating in real time. Ed Balls, former Labour Chancellor, married to current Labour Home Secretary Yvette, the man who's been accused of being so pro-Labour on Good Morning Britain that viewers regularly complain about bias, just absolutely rinsed the current government's economic messaging. And if Ed Balls isn't buying what Rachel Reeves is selling, why on earth should anyone else? Welcome to what might be the beginning of the end for Britain's Chancellor. And trust me, this is going to be a wild ride through betrayal, budget lies, and the spectacular implosion of political credibility. Let's set the scene properly, because context is everything here. Ed Balls joining Good Morning Britain was always going to be controversial from a bias perspective. The man was a Labour MP for years, he was literally a chancellor under Gordon Brown, and he's married to Yvette, who's currently serving as Home Secretary in Starmer's government. That's not just having connections to Labour, that's being Labour establishment through and through. So when he started appearing on GMB, bias accusations flew faster than you can say conflict of interest. Viewers have been complaining pretty much since day one that he goes soft on Labour politicians, that he doesn't ask the tough questions, that he lets them off the hook while grilling conservative or reform guests mercilessly. And honestly, those accusations weren't entirely unfair. There were definitely moments where Ed seemed to be pulling his punches when Labour MPs appeared. It's understandable from a human perspective because these are his friends, his colleagues, his wife's co-workers. But from a journalism perspective, it's problematic because viewers want tough questioning regardless of party. They don't want friendly chats where uncomfortable topics get glossed over. They want accountability. And for a long time, it seemed like Ed wasn't quite willing or able to deliver that when it came to his own side. Which is why what happened on Monday, December 1st was so absolutely shocking and significant. Instead of Susanna Reid, his co-host, taking the lead on grilling Chief Secretary to the Treasury Darren Jones, Ed Balls was more than happy to take the job himself. And he didn't just ask a few pointed questions and move on. He went in hard. He was visibly frustrated, clearly wound up, and absolutely not pulling punches. This wasn't friendly fire, this was full-on artillery bombardment from someone who's supposed to be on your team. It was the political equivalent of your own defender scoring an own goal, except deliberately and while making eye contact with the opposing manager. What's particularly delicious about the timing is that just last week, Ed Balls was being accused of being biased in favor of Rachel Reeves. Viewers were fuming that he was being too soft on the Chancellor, that he was being pro-Reeves during her appearance, that he wasn't holding her feet to the fire. So for him to do a complete 180-degree spin in less than a week and come out absolutely furious tells you something seismic has shifted. Either Ed's finally had enough of defending the indefensible, or the political winds have changed so dramatically that even he realizes it's safer to attack than defend. So what actually happened during this interview that got Balls so wound up? Well, Darren Jones appeared on the show presumably to defend Rachel Reeves and the government's economic policies, and he clearly got Ed Balls back up in a major way. Balls fumed at him, saying, "I just wonder whether it's wise for you to just dismiss this and say no, and that we are all wrong." That's not a gentle pushback. That's a former chancellor telling a current treasury minister that his defense is inadequate and insulting. Balls went on to say he's been involved with lots of budgets, but he found it very hard to understand what was happening with Reeves' budget at the time, which for him was jarring. Now, when a former chancellor says he found the budget hard to understand, that's damning with extremely faint praise. It's essentially saying either the budget was incompetently communicated or it was deliberately obfuscated, neither of which is a compliment. Balls has literally done this job. He knows how budgets work. He knows how they're presented. He knows what clarity looks like. And he's saying Reeves' budget didn't have it. That's a professional assessment from someone with direct experience, and it's absolutely brutal. But Balls wasn't done. He continued fuming that Darren Jones was essentially telling them they were wrong for even asking questions, adding, "When you say no, the question is wrong, we just feel like you're dismissing us." This is important because it speaks to a wider problem with how Labour's been handling criticism. Instead of engaging with legitimate concerns and questions, they've often responded with dismissiveness, with a "you don't understand" or "that's not what's happening." That kind of response might work in a political bubble, but to the public, it comes across as arrogant and evasive, and clearly, even someone as sympathetic to Labour as Ed Balls has had enough of it. Let's be really honest about what this moment represents. When Ed Balls, who has constantly been accused of being biased in favor of Labour and not asking tough questions when MPs join the show, suddenly tears into a government minister defending Rachel Reeves, that's a massive signal. It suggests that defending Reeves has become politically toxic, that the arguments in her favor are so weak that even her natural allies can't stomach making them anymore. If Ed Balls can't defend Rachel Reeves, she's in serious trouble, because if your most sympathetic interrogator has turned on you, what hope do you have with everyone else? The core issue here is credibility, and specifically, Reeves has lost it. She pledged not to increase the amount of tax people are paying. That was a clear, unambiguous promise. Then she delivered a budget that did exactly that through various mechanisms, including national insurance increases for employers, frozen thresholds, and various other revenue-raising measures. Now, you can argue about the technical definitions of tax rises, you can parse language about direct versus indirect taxes, you can explain economic necessity, but at the end of the day, people feel they're paying more tax after being told they wouldn't. That's a broken promise, and broken promises destroy political careers faster than almost anything else. Some MPs are sharing their fury privately and increasingly publicly. Voters are absolutely not impressed, which is evident from polling and public reaction. Reeves has well and truly lost the public support, and once that's gone, it's extraordinarily difficult to get back. Trust is like a vase. Once it's shattered, you can try to glue it back together, but it'll never be quite the same, and everyone will always see the cracks. Reeves's vase is thoroughly smashed, and no amount of economic jargon or treasury explanations are going to make people forget that she said one thing and did another. What makes this even more precarious for Reeves is her own apparent delusion about her position. She said on Sunday to Laura Kuenssberg that she's determined to continue as Chancellor for years to come. Years to come! That's an incredibly bold statement when many voters and backbenchers are openly calling for her resignation. It's like being on a sinking ship and confidently declaring you'll be captain for years to come, while water's rushing in and passengers are already in the lifeboats. It suggests either remarkable confidence or complete detachment from reality. And given the circumstances, the latter seems more likely. With more and more people turning against her, it's looking like her career is well and truly in tatters. And if she genuinely thinks she can come back from this combination of broken promises, economic policies that aren't working, terrible polling, and now even former Labour chancellors publicly questioning her competence, then she seriously needs a reality check. Politics is unforgiving, and once the narrative has turned against you, it takes something extraordinary to turn it back. What would that extraordinary thing be for Reeves? Miraculous economic growth? Suddenly falling inflation? A complete reversal of public opinion? None of those things seem remotely likely in the near term. And it's not just random observers noticing that Ed Balls turning on Reeves is mortifying for her. Piers Morgan, who's never one to miss a political feeding frenzy, took to X to write, "Watching a former Labour Chancellor Ed Balls rinsing the current Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister over Rachel Reeves' budget lies is extraordinarily damning. If even Ed doesn't believe her bullshit, why should anyone else?" Piers might be controversial, but he's got a point here. If your own side isn't buying the narrative, the credibility gap becomes impossible to ignore. When friendly interrogators become hostile, you know the situation is beyond saving. The responses to Piers's post were equally brutal. One user wrote, "Ed Balls tearing into the current chief secretary on live TV is wild. If even he isn't buying Rachel Reeves' budget fairy tales, why should the public swallow the same nonsense?" Budget fairy tales is a harsh but probably accurate description of how many people view the government's economic messaging right now. They're being told the economy's being fixed, growth is coming, things are improving, but people's lived experience doesn't match that narrative. Bills are still high, inflation is still eating away at wages, taxes have gone up despite promises they wouldn't, and public services still feel overstretched. When the fairy tale doesn't match reality, people stop believing in fairy tales. So where does Rachel Reeves go from here? That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? She can try to tough it out, keep her head down, hope the economic situation improves, and pray that voters eventually forget or forgive. That's the survival strategy, but it requires time, luck, and patience from both the public and her own party, none of which seem particularly abundant right now. Alternatively, she could resign, either voluntarily or under pressure, allowing someone else to take over as chancellor and potentially reset the government's economic narrative. That would be the honorable option if she genuinely believes she'd become a liability, but politicians rarely think they're the problem. They usually think everyone else just doesn't understand their genius. The third option is that she gets sacked. Keir Starmer could decide that Reeves has become too much of a liability, that defending her is dragging down the entire government, and that he needs a new chancellor to have any hope of turning things around before the next election. Given that Starmer himself is apparently facing potential removal based on some predictions, he might decide that throwing Reeves overboard could buy him some breathing room and goodwill. It wouldn't be pretty, and it would be a huge admission that Labour's economic strategy hasn't worked, but it might be politically necessary. What's particularly interesting about this moment is how it fits into the broader narrative of Labour's struggles that we've been covering. It's not just Starmer in trouble, it's not just bad polling, it's not just potential leadership challenges. It's also that key cabinet members like Rachel Reeves are losing credibility and support even from people who should naturally be on their side.